you and I really enjoyed the movie. We're bringing out the good things. Now, let's talk about this in criticism because right now we're doing a charitable reading of this because we really have no desire to enter this with kind of a hermeneutic of suspicion and skepticism. And then if I do that, I'll show everybody how smart I am when I critique this movie and just tear it to pieces and analyze it and 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 just say how it so disappointed me, right?
Yeah, but that makes
Um,
me feel good, John.
okay, yeah, okay. So, but then you're kind of like the character Leslie in the movie, and I'm not saying that. Look, there are bad movies. You and I probably just won't even review them.
Right.
Okay.
The opening scene of this movie, in the distance, there's this orchard, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it's kind of blurred out, and there's this huge field in between them and this orchard, like this peaceful place. And then we come back, the camera dollies back, and we see, Scott Schofield and Blake sleeping
Mm-hmm.
under a tree, kind of separated from Eden, maybe.
Right. Or yeah, it's like an almost a Sabbath rest, Edenic rest, right? I'm just thinking this through, but yeah, so good. Um,
And then the
yes,
lieutenant, I guess, right, comes up to him. He's like, "Hey, get up, pick a guy, and then come on." Right? Just
yes,
tells him to pick a guy.
yes.
And so he picks Schofield. And
Mm-hmm.
then he's telling Schofield, he was like, uh, have we eaten? Have they gotten food yet, or something like that?
Yes.
He's like, no, I would have. He was like, that's why I almost chose the priesthood, but the food, or something. He said something like the food wouldn't be as good
Right.
as it would be in the army or in the military.
Right. Right.
And it's almost like, well, no, right? It's not going to be. He was probably wrong on that.
Yeah, it depends. Depends if he took a vow of poverty and kind of an ascetic vow. Maybe it wouldn't have been. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
I understand what he's saying. I guess I understand what he's saying there a little bit. But keep going because I want to. Let's focus back on them.
yeah.
Um,
So like he but Schofield offers him the food, right?
yes, they break bread.
Yeah, and it was just like ham and bread or something like that.
Yeah, so he breaks bread with him right after he mentions entering the vocation of a priest, right?
Right.
But he didn't do that, so he ends up serving his country in the military instead. But there's still this kind of communion. It's like at least an analogy of a sacrament that's going on, right? So they're participating in this communion, this breaking of bread together before they go on this mission.
Right. And I guess it's like something that like I guess people, I mean, I guess it might be a common argument against people against like monks, monasteries, priesthoods is that like you're not actually putting in the work in the real world, you know?
It could be. It's certainly kind of a. It's certainly kind of a reformational critique, right? So Martin Luther uh, thought the monastic life didn't really put you out there in the real world.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, he certainly picked a vocation in the military that's not monastic in that sense. He's out in the world in all of its ugliness.
Right, but the elements of a monastic life or the liturgy of the church is
Yes,
still
still there.
present in his
Yeah.
life.
Yes, in the worst of circumstances. Because
Right.
I mean, it's hard to imagine. Look, all wars are horrible, and and I don't even want to pretend like I understand that, or even pretend like I could compare one war to another. But I don't care. Even if you are a veteran and you fought in war, you would say World War One is certainly miserable in its own way. Each war, and it's uniquely miserable, including the trench part of it. Right? It's
Right.
almost like it's almost like you're already buried, right? Because you're
Hmm.
below ground, you're in these trenches.
Yeah.
And that trench warfare was horrible. Not to mention in World War One, the armory was far ahead of the tactics. I mean, here these guys are trying to march and charge out of these trenches into other trenches and under this huge bombardment as well as machine gun fire. Yeah, there's nothing about that, including including the poisonous gas and all the rest that World War One had.
Yeah. So, anyways, Blake and Schofield, right? They take
Yeah.
part in some type of, breaking of bread,
Yes.
right? Some type of Eucharist situation.
Yeah.
And then they go to the general in that bunker, right? In the trench. And
Yes.
he tells him, "Hey, look, the other guy, who's played by Benedict Cumberbatch, right? Who they meet in the very end. So he
Yes.
hasn't seen the aerials that we have.
Yes.
And he thinks he has them on the run, and he's not going to stop."
Yes, you can see that about him. I mean, he's kind of a soldier, and which a soldier has to be that way, but his mission is primary.
Right. So what would be, mission's primary.
Even guys like that, maybe at the expense of his men, right?
Right. And so the general immediately goes into, "You have a brother, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, I forgot his name. What's his brother's name? Do you know?" I forgot.
I forgot it too,
But he gets that. Go ahead.
It's certainly an anti-Cain motion, right? Am I my brother's keeper?
Right. But he knows that's the emotional trigger that would make this man, Blake, get the job done.
Because Blake is the type that would see himself as his brother's keeper, right?
Yeah.
So he's certainly kind of an anti-Cain character.
Right. Yeah.
Because once he finds that out, to your point, man, he's determined to get to his brother.
Right. And Schofield's like, "Oh, crap. Like, how did I get signed up for this?" And how was Blake so like blindly positive and optimistic in this situation? And it's because of that love he has for his brother. At least that's how I see that.
I think that's right. I think that, I mean, if we're going to play off, and maybe, okay, fair enough. Maybe we're imposing these in there, but that's okay. Maybe we're imposing these motifs in there. But I certainly think it's legitimate to say that he is an anti-Cain. He loves his brother. Once he finds that out, it's like, I'm in.
Yeah. And like skipping forward ahead, when Schofield witnesses or goes through this journey, right, with Blake helps him, they help each other, what all the things we're going to get to, and then dies, right?
Yeah.
Schofield now takes on the mission, not because the general said to do it, but because of the love he has for Blake and the love Blake had for him.
Yes.
So now Schofield gets it.
Yeah. So he's
maybe unconsciously.
Yeah. Okay. Before we get there, because the general does.
I jumped way too fast.
No, you're right, and there's so much rich stuff there before we get there, because the general does. He quotes Kipling from Gehenna to the Throne, and that's exactly what Schofield's going to go through. He's going to go through hell, and I would call the throne the accomplishment of the mission, as well as kind of represents his redemption, right? The fulfillment of this mission. Now he's participating in that. I love the way you put that. So now he's going to participate in this love that Blake has for his brother. He becomes part of that union of the love between now it's not just the two, but it becomes the three. And you even see that at the end when Schofield's talking to his brother.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's like he has a love for Blake's brother now.
Yeah. Even to the point he wants to be the one that writes the letter to the family.
Yeah. That's powerful. And it's like, yeah, we might be imposing these ideas, but like it resonates because there's truth. I mean, it's not gonna,
Absolutely.
you know.
Because you and I would agree that even when somebody writes a screenplay, there's more meaning to it than they even know,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, I mean
That's
that goes to divine, like inspiration itself. Like what is that, and where does it come from?
Yeah, exactly. And even a really good author or screenwriter, when you bring that up to them, they're like, "Yeah, I never even thought about
Right.
that." But then they see that you know what? It's there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Hey,
Okay.
baby.
And we can talk about that sometime. Keep going.
Right. So they get the commission, right? Right. The commission,
Yes,
the
that's right.
orders.
It is a commission. Yep. It's order.
And then they start leaving, right? So the first obstacle they get. The funny thing about this is it's so I can relate to this because in this film, the most opposition that they come against is from within. It's because the first person they come into contact with, once they get the order and they start to leave, they try to bust through this group of soldiers within the trench,
Right.
and this guy takes it, as like a flex on his, manhood, and he's like, "Hey, dude, don't you be bumping up to me?" Kind of a scenario,
Right.
and he's like, "Hey,
Yeah.
we got orders,"
Yeah.
and he's like, "Oh, okay," but it's like within his own group of people, they're
Yeah.
holding him back.
Yes. It's almost like they're not focused, and you wouldn't blame them either. They're not
Right.
focused because they're just, I mean, think how nihilistic it is just to stay in a trench all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, those are incredible men. And I certainly don't think I could do that. But those guys would stay in that trench all the time. The meaninglessness of just being in a trench, right?
Right.
Because because even if they do look out, and even when they look out with the scope, what do you see but a desolate, burned up, fried up landscape with dead bodies and dead horses?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, no, you're right.
And lack of progress. They
Well,
don't see the progress.
and think about those guys. Once again, you can't blame them because none of them have been given a commission to go try to save somebody they really love,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Those poor guys are just stuck in that trench. Like, okay,
Yeah.
when eventually we might get orders to go over this trench, and we're with almost certain death.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's a tough. It's like a it is a desolate place.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
I resonate with that because like growing up where I grew up, surrounded by the people I was surrounded by, like I got that same interaction when they're like, "Hey, dude, don't act big," because I've been here for 50 some years and nothing's happened.
yeah, and probably as you get older, you almost feel sorry for her, you
Yeah.
right. So
Yeah. Yeah. I
at the
have a
time,
better understanding of where that attitude
yes,
comes from now.
because at the time you'd probably been more like, okay, I don't like you because you're trying to resist me. Now you look back and you think, you know what? Um, it might have been an impediment, but you understand where those where they're
Yeah.
coming from. So now back to, but I want you to get back to the character they run into after that.
Right. So after that, they come into contact with Lieutenant Leslie.
Yes.
Right. And he was my favorite character. I was telling you, he's just like, "Oh, that's the order, huh?" And everything's a joke to him because he is so disillusioned with this being anything other than uh, people with titles telling us what to do and just killing
Yeah.
ourselves, and it's all
Right.
meaningless, and we're not gonna. This isn't for us. This like we have no control over this. This is a joke. Um, and I just that was an interesting take because you just see different I guess perceptions of what this war is about amongst these different leaders. The general one, uh, the first person he comes in contact, the other soldier, this guy, Lieutenant Leslie, and then the other guy that they meet after Blake dies, who picks him up on the truck, picks Schofield up on the truck.
Yes, right.
And he's just like, I understand. Like, he is the guy that you want to be led by.
Yeah, he's a great, because it's, I mean, I don't know what the time frame is, but he's a great encouragement right in the middle of this journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even his exhortation to Schofield, be careful, because some people just want to fight, right?
Yeah.
So you might even have these orders, but the guy still wants to fight. Now think about this. So the desolate place, as they go up over the trench, that desolate wasteland, right? So T.S. Eliot, famous British poet, wrote a poem called The Wasteland. So, but the wasteland's within the heart. So it's almost like this external world that they've created by bombing it and killing almost anything living, including man, animal, and plant, right? It's not like you go up over that trench. It's desolate. It's almost like that external world that they've created is within their heart, right? So their heart's just nihilistic and desolate, and it's a dark place. And that's why Leslie, is that it? That's why he represents that. But he's a like what you pointed out, because he does this unction upon them, which he's doing that almost sarcastically, right? Out of this jaded kind of, but then it ends up being ironic, because it's a divine blessing for the commission that they're going to go on, right?
Yeah.
It's meant to be for him as kind of a sarcastic gesture, but actually, this kind of almost providential irony ends up being they are being blessed before they go on this mission.
Yeah, because that's what he does. He's like,
Yes.
oh, well, this is ridiculous, so let me just bless you with my liquor.
Yes.
My whiskey or whatever. I'll bless you with, what was it, the holy unction, right? Which is what we're talking about, the sacrament, which is offered for the healing of soul and body for the forgiveness of sins.
For those ready to die, right? So
for those ready to die.
It's a right, because for him, he assumes that's what's going to happen when they go up over that trench. But there's, not only does the general have aerial pictures that give him a level of knowledge that this guy doesn't have. It's almost like there's a guiding divine providence even above all of them that's controlling this. And Leslie doesn't see that.
He's only got that one perspective of in that trench.
That's what a jaded, nihilistic, skeptical heart does. It lowers your vision of sight. It puts on blinders, right? It blinds you to see something, to use the words of C.S. Lewis, it blinds you to see in the deeper magic. You can only see what's on the surface, right? So for the believer, non-believers like to make fun of the idea of faith, right? So faith is, affirming what you have no evidence for. Faith is believing what ain't so, believing against the evidence. No, what faith does is actually give you a deeper vision to see things that you can't see. And so Blake sees that. That's why he even has hope in this mission, and he's almost convinced that he can do this, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So then they go up over the hill, and go ahead.
Right before you start that, don't you think that if Lieutenant Leslie would have been approached by the general, he would have been way more accepting of that information rather than having some guy like Blake come up to him and tell him that? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like Leslie is so embittered that he's demanding someone like the general to tell him the truth, because like no one else is going to tell me the opposite of what I've seen except somebody up there. And I'm just going to stay bitter until that person comes and informs me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that might be. He might have, I don't know. He might have believed the general, or he might have been so jaded, even if the general would have went down there, he's like, and once again, you don't blame the guy. I mean,
right, of course.
You can't. That would be any of us. He's lost so many men, and all he's seen is death, destruction, and desolation.
Yeah.
Right. Um, like I said, when you look at the scope and you look out over that desolate land, yeah. Once again, how could he believe there would be a deeper magic? There can't be. This is just all there has to be, just death and destruction.
I find it interesting to as we go through this movie, you see all these different perspectives of of what this war is and what your relationship to this war is, and how many different ways of viewing this one thing can be.
Yeah.
You know, and based on a multitude of different facets, such as who are you with every day? What part of the war have you been witnessing? Have you been in the trenches, or have you been in the cockpit of a plane looking over? Or it's like, what
Right.
perspective do you have, and like relative to
Okay.
life?
I like that because so even in this is certainly not my area. You're more studied than I am, but even at camera angles, so the camera shot from above is a God's eye view, right?
Yeah.
Right. So even in in many films, so if you have a shot from above, it's a God's eye view. So the general has a God's eye view, whereas the corporal, lance corporal, private on the ground, I mean, all he sees is what's in front of him. So you're right. The rest of these guys, that's all they would have. So the general actually has this God's eye view given to him by these aerial photos.
Yeah. Okay, so then they're blessed and they go over the hill,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they go through this land of death, right?
And remember, he gets to shoot that flare eventually to let Leslie know
Right.
your vision of reality is not what you're wrong.
Yeah.
Um,
And he did
there
it in
is
like a little bit of spite,
he did, but
you know?
he's trying to show him there's still a thing such as hope even in such a desolate place,
Right.
right? Because one of the things, like one of the demonic or satanic things, is to kill hope in a human heart,
Right.
right? So to be the one that extinguishes any light of hope is certainly it's a satanic thing to do, right?
Right.
But if all you have in front of you is a desolate land, and that's all you can see, and you can't see any deeper magic, well, then what would you hope for anyway, right?
Right.
The only hope I have is the next drink in this little flask of mine. That's the only hope.
Right.
Okay, all right, keep
Which
going.
which
So
which reminds me of what we were talking about last week about watching signs again.
yeah,
He didn't want to see things
exactly.
as signs that were,
Okay,
but when he finally was at his wit's end and that alien shows up and he's like, okay, I'm stuck in the living room holding my dying son, or he's got my son.
yes.
The alien's holding my son. Now I have nothing. Like, I can't do anything. Now I'm going to listen to what my dying wife said when she told me to see.
So the this is what we're saying. So if you look at the senses, or excuse me, the lenses, let's say a lens to see reality has to be composed of sense experience, reason, and faith, right? So what we're saying is that a proper human vision has to be composed of all three. And so unbelief actually takes out that last essential part of what it is for a human being to see. That's why faith for us is not the lack of sight. It's the ability to see something deeper. Sometimes philosophers talk about seeing and seeing as, right? So you and I look at the same thing, and it could be a work of art. It could be, you and I are out in the woods and we see this grass that's laid over, And I'm like, oh, that's weird. This grass laid over here. Like, no, no, no. Look, there were two deer here, and a doe and it's with its babies. So you see as I only see, and that's what we're saying. Faith does. Faith is it allows you to see certain things at a deeper level. And of course, if you want to be skeptical and cynical and everything else, of course you're going to make fun of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I get that. But guess what? Like a Blake at the beginning and eventually Schofield, it gives them a vision to see something far deeper and the possibility of accomplishing the mission, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So they go into this land of death, right? They come over the hill, right? And then they're trying to crouch down because they don't really know if the Germans have left.
Yes, right.
They're hoping to God the general's right.
Yes.
And that's when Schofield cuts his hand, right?
Yes.
And then falls down, puts his hand in a dead body.
Yes.
I was thinking when the first time I saw that, I was like, "Oh, he's going to lose his hand. It's going to become start to rot, become necrotic or necrosis, and then just that's going to be a plot point, or that's going to play into
I
it."
get you. I think the same thing. It's rather, especially with all the stuff going on viruses, you think, oh, that's
But it didn't.
rather unsanitary, right?
I thought that was going to play a bigger factor, but it didn't.
No, I think it. Yes, only then he's really being, to use more religious terms, he's really being baptized into the dead, right?
Yeah.
So he's it's almost his way of almost going to Gehenna, right? So just as back to Kipling's the general quoted Kipling, I mean, he is really participating in Gehenna.
Yeah.
To the point that he has put his cut hand into a dead body.
Right. And so they get through that death field or whatever, and then they come over the hill, and that's the first cut.
Yeah. So to your point, imagine how futile it would have been two guys with two guns to come over the trench. I mean, look, you would do it because that you're a soldier, you're going to fight. But imagine if there's a whole regiment of German soldiers with your
Yeah.
you're not, that isn't going to do much. But
Only,
you're right.
Only a man driven by the love of his brother.
Okay, yeah, I like that. So, or if only a few German soldiers are left, but still,
Right.
your point. They're just surely hoping, man. I hope the God's eye view, what the general claims, is true. So yes, they come up over that trench. And so where does it get cut?
So when they climb over the last hill, Blake comes up halfway. No. Schofield goes up halfway, and then Blake goes, "Hey, help," or something like that, or "Hey, give me a hand." And then Schofield looks down, grabs Blake, and pulls him up the first half, and now Blake's
Okay.
above him, and then they crawl over the hill together. But
Okay.
Schofield had to help Blake up. And then as they go up and over, the camera comes around that hill, and then I think that was where the first cut is, and then
Okay.
they come down the hill. That's how they transition in the film. It's like they come around where the people are, like the actors are out of the shot, and it's just earth, and then they pick up with them on the other side of the hill. I think that's how they kind of did that one take thing, which actually wasn't one take.
And that's right before they go into that tomb,
right? Right. And then they go in there. The Germans aren't in the trench, and they go into the tomb,
yes,
or the bunker or whatever.
Yes.
And I mean, they're looking at the bunks, and when I was watching, I was like, oh, they're kind of seeing how similar their enemy is to them.
Right.
They just had bunks. I mean that's, I don't know. That's how I was looking at it.
Yeah.
And then they found the rats, and then the rat hit the whatever thing, and then it caused that explosion, and then everything goes down, and Schofield goes blind.
Yeah. So think of Yeah, think how crazy that is. They almost died because of some rats. You you if yeah, you could say, okay, if the rat would have pulled the, what was it, the food or something, it was what,
Something I can't remember.
yeah, so I think it was. But if the rat would have pulled it, sets the tripwire, they all die. Okay. That's it, man. That's red tooth and claw, Darwinism at its best, and that's it.
Yeah.
Which might fit your philosophy. It would make a horrible movie, though. You could, I mean, then you just cut away, and that's it. That's the end of the movie, right?
Yeah.
Or would it? Right? So if you're trying to make
That might have won the Oscar for best
yeah,
film.
if you're gonna make a really nihilistic movie to show us once again there's no meaning to life, and how meaningful and profound it is to show you that there's no meaning in life again.
Yeah, that's where we
You
find meaning. We find
you
meaning
could,
in showing you there's no meaning.
yeah, and we'll do that one more time.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you'll win an award because it's so qualitatively distinct and beautiful. All right, keep going.
So,
Keep
anyways,
going.
so Schofield's blind, and he has to literally take a leap of faith.
Yes.
You know, when he's blind, and Blake's like, "Come on, just jump. Trust me." He jumps over this little, I don't know, cavern or whatever, and then they walk out. There's light at the end of the tunnel. They come out, and he has to wash his eyes off, and then
Okay, so I like that because that is a good it's a good understanding of faith. And it can, so if whatever human being's faith in God, when we talk about faith, we can only use it in an analogous manner, right? Because
right,
so whatever it means to have faith in God, that's got to be so unique, so sui generis that we can only use human examples, right? Because that kind of faith is so deep and so thick. The best we can do is to give personal examples. So I like that. So what Schofield has to do is he has to accept Blake as somebody who cares for him, somebody that loves him, and somebody he can trust.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Because can you think of put yourself in a position you would be asked to trust a human being in a position that would require greater trust than that example?
right,
It'd be hard to match, wouldn't it?
yeah,
You're blind. You're in this tomb. You're in a cave, and there's this cavern which is probably about the width of you can barely jump. And your buddy's saying, "Look, you got to trust me. You have to jump. You've got to jump now." And he does it.
yeah.
That's a good that that gives you a good personal example of what it is to have faith in someone.
Yeah, and I think at least, I mean, well, look, the more examples you have, or someone has in their life of another human being uh, sticking to their word or doing certain things for you, the more you're capable of having faith in other people,
Yes.
right? But like if you're not surrounded by people who you trust, who love you and care for you and hold and stick to their word, then yeah, you're not gonna. That's gonna be such a
Once
foreign idea to you.
Absolutely. And once again, we totally understand why somebody would be jaded that way,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and so what we're trying to do is, if we present somebody the gospel, part of what we're trying to tell them is, okay, I know that you've been just treated really crappy in your life, and there have been people that have betrayed you, people in positions of trust that you thought you could rely upon, and instead of fulfilling that trust and giving you some sort of hope, they extinguished it, right? So they put out the light of hope in your heart because of the way they treated you. And by the way, we've all done that to other people. I've done it to other people. Okay. So, but what we're saying to you is there's actually a person, and his name's Jesus, and he actually won't do that.
Right.
And we'll prove that to me. Well, he hung on a cross. He was crucified for you.
Yeah.
I don't know what more weighty, iconic symbol you could have than somebody hanging naked on a cross.
Right.
That's okay. Keep going.
All right. So they come
But
out
you're
of that.
right. I
Yeah.
totally agree with what you're saying.
So Schofield starts second guessing the mission, right? And
Well, I would too. Oh my goodness.
even though Blake got him through that,
Yes.
it's like, I got way too close to death. I'm not really as into this as you are. Why did you pick me? And Blake's like, look, dude, I didn't know what the mission was. The lieutenant or whoever said, pick somebody, and I picked you. And I mean, I don't know. You could take that different ways. I mean, Schofield could be like, hey, you know what? Thank you. I appreciate you having that much trust in me or faith in me to take this on. But like after everything they've gone through, it's like,
Oh,
I mean, we don't really need to be doing this, dude. Like,
and once again, and I know you agree with me. How could you blame him?
right.
All I've done so far is gone across this just absolutely horrible, desolate place. I've cut my hand. I put it in a dead body. I've been down in this tomb. I'm not even, I mean, he gets the water and he knows he can see now, but I mean, I didn't even know I could see. Almost died down there. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly understandable how you'd be Debbie Downer at that point, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then he's like, well, you don't have to. You can go back. And he was like, dude, don't. It's more like, man, don't test me, dude.
Although,
it's like, but when he gave him that permission to go back, he's like, I could see like me in that situation. Like I'll say, hey, man, I don't want to do this. I don't. My buddy Matt, when we work out, like he's always pushing me,
right?
and he's like, all right, so this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna go for an hour doing these three things, and I'm like, God Almighty, why did I say yes to this? And he's like, you don't have to, and I'm like, oh, dude, I'm doing it. Don't
No,
tell me
right.
I don't have to, because now I'm gonna do it.
Yeah. No, there is some. I think of Shakespeare, King Henry V, when they know they're way outnumbered, and it's not until Henry says, "Look, I'll pay your ransom. Your passport will be made. You'll be totally under the king's permission to go back to England." It's not until he presents him with that possibility, but then he also presents him with the possibility that fewer men, the greater share of honor.
Right.
And if you stay here and fight with me, then and he gets rid of class distinctions. Any man shed his blood with me this day shall gentle his condition. There he be civil. To your point, once they're offered the freedom to not do the mission, that's when they start to, and I think it's true of Schofield too. They start to become all in at that point. Once you give me an option.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And then he's just like, dude, fire the flare.
He's starting, but then Schofield gives him the water, right? So he's not blinded anymore.
Right.
So he will begin to see at this point, right? He begins to see what Blake sees, but he can't see that before.
Yeah, and it's like he had to go blind to see as.
Yes. So then he also had to have this relationship of trust and faith with Blake to begin to see as.
Right. And then he tells him, just shoot the flare, dude. And so Blake shoots that flare in like spite of Lieutenant Leslie.
Right.
Saying, hey, dude, we made it. Nobody's here, dude.
Yeah.
You're wrong.
You're wrong. Maybe there is hope in the world. Maybe with your narrow vision of jadedness, maybe there's more to the world than what you actually think you can see.
I was watching that again this morning, and I saw that scene, and I saw right as he rightfully, had a right to feel this way, like, hey, I proved you wrong, dude. You came at me with all that sarcasm and that nihilistic viewpoint, and you came like you You made me feel like I was stupid. Now I'm going to make you feel stupid.
I'm going to throw a little hope at you.
Yeah, I'm going to throw a little hope at you, but a little shade too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair enough. Okay,
And I
let's
get
keep.
it. I
I
get that. And that's what a lot of people do. I think that is the battle between most people who feel that there is meaning in life and there's no meaning in life. Like, I think that they're just kind of throwing little jabs. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And
yeah,
maybe not just meaning, but like uh, politically, I think too. Especially on social media, you just see little jabs like, you're wrong, you're wrong, and it goes back and forth. And it's like you can't
yeah,
really break bread with somebody doing that.
yeah, yeah. I want to agree with you. I wish it was just little jabs. It's almost like all-out warfare anymore on political issues.
Right.
Um, no,
Instead of breaking bread and having that conversation, dude, I get why you feel that way.
right. It's no once you're no longer willing to try to, which we all do, and I'm certainly probably most guilty of all. But once you're no longer willing to to try to understand and try to see where they're coming from, right? So Blake understanding Leslie by saying, "Look, I get it, man. You've been on the front line the whole time, and all you're seeing is death and destruction. I get it, man. I get the whole why you can't see anything." Okay, so where do they go next after that?
So they go up the hill, and this might have been the most realistic point in the whole film for me. Is Schofield has just said, dude, why'd you pick me? Pretty much said, I don't want to do this. And then Blake's like, all right, you don't have to. Schofield says, nah, dude, just fire the flare. I'll go with you. Blake
Mm-hmm.
starts telling him a joke.
Yes.
He
Yes.
tells him a story. Hey, you ever hear what happened to so-and-so's ear?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, no. And then it's almost like he's like, what happened? And
Yeah.
it's I just find that in life, like when something really crappy happens, and then there's somehow somebody's going to be there to tell that story to like lighten the mood. I find that
Yeah.
I'm usually that person. Like I was that person my entire life, where I could find the funny in something or the silly and get somebody laughing again.
So to do that, there has to, right. So to see the humor in something, or even yeah. So that's to see something as funny is to be able to kind of get outside yourself a little bit, to not take yourself so seriously and your circumstances, to have a moment of levity that you can see the incongruency of things.
Right.
But if you're so self-absorbed, that's not possible, right? So if
Yeah.
you're so turned in on yourself, you can't see why that story's humorous, because now they're talking about another person,
Right.
right? This person they know.
Yeah.
So to do that, you've got to get outside yourself a little bit to focus on another human being. But you can't do that if you're so St. Augustine, Martin Luther, incurvatas in se. If you're so turned in on yourself, you're so incurved on yourself, it's hard to see humor in things, right?
Right. And so, what would be the argument against? Like, I know a lot of people who have always, like, when I do that, and those people who are consumed with their thoughts about themselves and their
Right.
situation in the present moment, um, they look at me as unintelligent or stupid, maybe. Um, but they just can't get out of themselves.
It's like right, and I understand what you're saying, because we're not saying, obviously, it's kind of like the appropriateness of telling a funny story at a funeral about that person, right?
Right.
That's not inappropriate. Now, it would be inappropriate to have some sort of ridiculous buffoonery going on, trying to bring attention to yourself or whatever. But to tell a funny story, it's almost I like what you're saying here. It's almost like humor in that situation. It bespeaks hope, right?
Right.
Like we can still laugh about even in the midst of this, and that's why even the British are known for their dark humor, even in the worst of circumstances, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that's a way to, it's a coping. It really is kind of a coping mechanism, and I think that's good. You're right. So they come over to the hill. He starts to tell a joke.
And then they start laughing.
Yes.
And then they mention something about Schofield is like, yeah, you deserve a medal for saving me or something like that.
Yeah.
And he was like, really? You think so? And he was like, yeah. He was like, well, what happened to yours? He's like, I don't have it anymore. It's just 10. Right? And he's like, well, I mean, there's a ribbon on it too. And he was like, yeah. He was like, well, where did you? He was like, I would never have let mine go. Like, why would you let yours go? He goes in on him, and he's like, I would never have done that. Like, what made you do that? And he was like, look, dude, I swapped it with a French officer for a bottle of wine because I was thirsty. And I don't know. I mean, I was thinking about because back then you brought home a medal like that. I mean that's a career. You know, that's a reward that you got, you know, from one of the worst wars humanity's ever seen, and that would really look good on a resume, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's almost like a birthright.
It could be, and in that sense, you almost admire Schofield in the sense of like, if this medal's about me, I'm willing to chuck it aside for a bottle of wine. But then I think if you look at what Blake's saying, yeah, but that medal's not just about you.
Right.
It's also about the men you saved, and it's also about you know what I mean. It's like any sort of sacred object or icon.
Yeah.
It's what it points to in presence that that's why it matters, and so it's not just about you, right? So
Right.
even and that's to see it as a healthy emblem, right? So if you're because you and I because of sports, so if you win a medal in sports, this kind of what we're talking about, this Incurvatas would say is approach would be, yeah, this medal's about me and my great accomplishments and everything I've done. That's true, but it's not just about you, right? It's about the people that gave you food to eat so you could win that medal. It's about the coaches that invested in you. It's about the other people that didn't get a stand on the podium, but they were the ones that pushed you and loved you and believed in you, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's two ways to look at that medal. I don't know if that makes any sense. Maybe.
No, I agree with you there, but it just reminded me of Jacob and Esau. You know.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Selling. Yeah.
Because Esau was hungry, so he went to Jacob and gave him his birthright for a bowl of soup or something. You know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Whereas, a little different.
No. Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah. So I think you're right, though. I think Blake has this almost, because of his love for his brother, he almost has this innocent heart. Once again, he has 20/20 vision on his faith to see something beyond. Schofield doesn't have that yet.
Right.
He's getting there. Okay, keep going. So then where do they go next?
So they go to this German farmhouse or wherever they are, right? A little farmhouse.
Yes.
And it's the cherry blossoms.
Yes. Now contrast that to that desolate, like Jesus being in the desert 40 days and 40 nights, that desolate place, right? So what Eliot's talking about, the wasteland. Yeah. Then you get this beautiful scene of almost idyllic.
Yeah.
It still has the stain of sin upon it because we still got this battle going on, but it's almost idyllic with the cherry blossoms, right? It's beautiful.
Yeah, and they walk through this broken gate, this broken wall.
So there's the stain of sin still.
Yeah. And they
but
see all.
it's almost like the earth is resisting it still, though,
Mm-hmm.
because there's still beauty there, right?
Right. Yeah. I always find like farmhouses or stuff like that have been like worn down and like dilapidated. I just always found those fascinating. Like you get a sense of maybe a haunting or like a presence of like, man, what was there and how much work was
Exactly.
put into that and what type of people built this, and now it's kind of dilapidated. And
That's because it's like a venue to give you all these potentialities of your imagination
yeah.
to think of what might have been,
Mm-hmm.
and that's pretty cool, right? So
Yeah.
that's how people get inspired to. But okay, so
Right.
here's the thing, right? So they walk over, they see the trees,
Yeah. And
and they're
Schofield's like,
the
cherry
stain of
blossom.
sin's still there because they're all cut down.
Mm-hmm.
So Schofield's like, oh, right. Once again, let's just add to more of the nihilism. So we
He
take
just
these
sees it
beautiful,
as trees cut down.
yes, these beautiful trees. Look at it. It's just they're ruined. What good are they now? I mean, once again, these evil human, and rightfully so, these sinful, evil human beings have destroyed this beauty of the earth. Why would you have to do that? Okay.
Yeah.
And then Blake, what?
Blake goes in. He's like, well, I mean, there's different cherries. There's different cherry trees. There's this tree, and Schofield's like, what, dude? How do you know all about this? He's like, well, we had an orchard growing up, and my brother and I would pick them every year, and it would take us all day, and we'd pick them in May. And this particular cherry tree, if you cut it down, once the stone rots, I think that's what he said. Once the stone rots, they'll grow back way more than were cut down, or something like that.
Right.
Right. But
Yes.
he
I don't
has,
remember off the top of my head exactly how he states it, but yes.
yeah, he has more experienced knowledge, right? More informed, through experienced knowledge, I guess. There's a better way to say that.
No, I think you're
Than
right.
Schofield.
Okay, so, but what I like about what you're saying, it's not just this. He can state the facts, which he can, right?
Right.
So he has enough scientific knowledge, right? Enough, and by science I just mean it in a very general term. So he has enough scientific knowledge to be able to tell, once again, the difference between seeing and seeing as,
Mm-hmm.
right? So Schofield can only see sinful human beings cut down these trees. What a shame. But then Blake can see more. But not only that, to your point, he goes, it not only does he see what kind of tree it is, the possibility of it, or those kind of things. He also, that story is an occasion for him to recollect back to his life. That tree has a personal knowledge to it too, because
Personal knowledge.
it relates him back to his family, right? He's still open to those beautiful and true and good things about existence and reality.
Yeah.
Which Blake isn't at this point. But then excuse me, not Blake, which Schofield isn't at this point. Blake is. And then, but then he almost gives, Jesus's word, right? So these things, when they die, they'll bring forth even more beauty, more trees, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if a grain of wheat must fall and die to bring forth fruit, right? So that's the idea of a phoenix. That's the resurrection motif, the Christian motif of even in the most nihilistic, hopeless situation of death,
Right.
there's still the hope of resurrection.
Right. And a type of resurrection or growth that you don't even know. It
Yes.
took us a whole day every year to pick off all these cherries.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine that, a whole day. There's so many cherries.
Yes, brings forth much fruit.
Yeah. And I mean that's what this kind of war was, right?
Okay,
Any
so
type of war for a good cause, right?
So this conversation of the death of the trees and bringing forth more fruit. Now, where are we going next in the story?
Well, we go to the farmhouse, right?
Yes.
And nothing's there. But he goes out to the what I guess was a horse stall,
Yeah.
right? And before he sees the milk, he sees the cow in the field.
Yes.
And then he looks behind him and sees the bucket of freshly milked milk.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh wow!" and starts drinking some of it. I thought there was going to be more at play there.
Okay.
Like that's freshly milked. Somebody's there.
Exactly. So this is I agree that I love the kind of the mystery that leaves you there because you're like, okay, is there a farmer around? Did somebody had to milk that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I also like is that even in the midst of this death, it's still fruitful. Cows are still producing milk that can still nourish your body. Okay. But okay, good. I
They
like that.
killed everything except this cow.
Yeah, like
They cut trees down, but they didn't kill the cow. Right?
yeah, right.
Interesting.
Okay. And I don't know what more to make of that, but
I
I
don't either.
agree. And maybe there is more to make of it, and I just can't see it. I still can't see it, right? Keep going.
And then they start witnessing the dogfight in the air, right? Two American pilots against a German pilot.
The British, yeah, right. It'd be
Right,
British,
right.
probably. It might be American.
Yeah.
It's possible, but okay.
And
anyway.
then they shoot the German pilot down.
Yeah.
And they save him. He's on fire.
Yes.
And they save him, and they pull
They
him
even
out.
is a sign of love and kindness even towards your enemy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because nobody wants to die by burning to death.
No, I doubt it. No. But they do. They show an act of humanity and love and kindness towards their enemy. And I get it. People can, oh, that's how ridiculous, how stupid. Well, okay, keep going.
Well,
Keep going.
you get what you want if you think that's ridiculous, because that soldier ends up killing Blake. But Blake is like, hey, we got to help him, get him some water. And Schofield's like, all right. And he goes to get him some water, and then he hears him, stop. The German soldier stabbed him. Schofield comes back, shoots him twice, and kills him, and then, holds Blake as he bleeds to death.
Yeah, so yeah, and that's where now, out of Blake's death,
he's given new orders.
He is so united to Blake now that he's taking his burden, right? So we could play off Lord of the Rings here, right?
Yeah.
So he, I mean, obviously Samwise and Frodo both live, but the point is that he now is willing to take his burden upon him, his mission upon him, and there is a change. And so, like the trees back there that will die and eventually bring forth fruit, Blake's death begins to bring forth fruit.
Yeah.
Now, something is, there's a resurrection within the soul of Schofield now.
Right. And it's a letter. Blake gives him a letter, right? That he wrote to his family. Is that right?
He takes the letter. I think the letter, though. Okay, and I hate that I think it's actually the orders, isn't it? Isn't that what he grabs?
It could be. Yeah.
I think it's the orders. Now he's willing to take the orders upon himself. Right.
Yeah.
And then of course he removes Blake's dog tags and his rings.
Yeah.
Which would symbol the family.
Right.
Probably. Okay.
And then all of a sudden troops show up. Just moments later.
Yep.
And
they kind of just appear almost, right?
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting the way they did that.
Yeah.
But then that's when we meet Captain Smith, played by Mark Strong. And he's the guy that you would like to be like. I mean, for me at least, I really liked his demeanor.
Yeah.
He was humble enough to listen to Schofield and be like, all right, look, I get it. I'm going to help you as much as I can.
Yes.
And then You got to
He's
get the
the
job done.
encouragement he needs, and he also gives him good advice.
Yeah, and then Schofield gets on the Jeep in the back, and he's surrounded by all these guys who were just like, they're all coping by being, sarcastic about everything,
Yeah.
so that they don't break down because of all that's going on, right? And then Schofield's like, "You look, dude, I'm beyond that. I'm beyond that right now. I've got a mission because of what I just went through, and I saw my, not blood but brother, not by blood but brother die, and
Yes.
I gotta do something. Like I've got to finish this mission."
Yeah.
And they might have a mission, right, to serve the United or the British Army or
Right.
whatever.
Correct. Yep.
But
Yep.
there's a deeper mission, right, that Schofield's tapped into.
Mm-hmm.
And those
Yeah.
guys they're just not there yet.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's absolutely right. The Bible talks about double-mindedness, single-mindedness, is what one has to have in order to accomplish something. Well, he's certainly single-minded at this point.
Yeah. And you could tell it physically by the physical act of the truck breaking down in the mud, and he's
You're
pushing
right.
this thing no matter what. And
It
all these
gives
other
him,
guys are like, "Dude, look, just chill, man. We're not going to get this out of here." And he's like, "No, we're going to get this out of here. I've got to get there. The only way we're doing that is by getting this thing out of the mud. Let's do it."
what died in Blake is alive in me now, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So they do that, and then they drop him off right at the river or the creek or whatever. And I can't remember what Captain Smith tells him. What does he say? Do you remember?
If I remember right, the point was,
When you give these orders, make sure people are watching or witnessing.
Yes, because he recognizes some soldiers, no matter what, the mission's going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They lose sight of the mission for their own.
Yeah, they almost lose sight of their men, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. When I heard that, I was like, "Oh man, that's so." I've not seen that in another movie.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. He's certainly different than Leslie, right? He's encouraging him, he's helping him, and he's also giving him great advice.
Yeah, and he's like, "Look, here's the real issue. All the trials you're going through, it's going to be tough. I get it. Been there, done that. But this is the real thing. The political thing you're getting ready to fight when you meet Benedict Cumberbatch, that's the real battle. Because if you can't get through that, all this is going to be for nothing."
Yeah. Yeah.
That was just interesting to see because no one really ever. I don't think I've ever seen that expressed in a character before.
Yeah, no, I liked it. I liked it a lot. I'm with you. I'm certainly drawn to his character.
Yeah.
I'd like to follow a guy like that.
Right. And because he was under like when he shows up, when Captain Smith shows up at the farmhouse, and they get into the Jeep, Captain Smith is talking to the guy over him, who's in that front Jeep, and that guy's just complaining about the tree in front of them. That his soldiers are trying to move. He's like, "Just move the tree,
Yeah.
just pivot it around." Blah, blah. And Captain Smith's like, "All right, well, we've got this guy. We've got room in the back." Like he's setting him up. He knows how to communicate with his superior, so that this guy's wrath or inability to see things clearly will be able to make the right decision. By letting Schofield join them.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like he knows how to meander around this guy's ego.
Yeah. Right. I think that's right. I think he's that type of a character. Yeah, I'd have to. I mean, I'd have to go back and look at that again. But I agree with everything you're saying. He's right in the middle of his mission, and I don't mean his mission because he really didn't pick up Blake's mission until just recently, right?
Right.
But he's right in the middle, somewhere seems like the middle of the film, and he's just like I said, gives him encouragement, wisdom, and helps him.
Yeah. And then he crosses the river and gets sniped at, right? He's getting sniped.
Mm-hmm.
And that was interesting because he battles this guy, climbs the tower, gets up there, opens the door, shoots the guy, kills him, but also gets shot in the ear and the side of the head.
Right.
Falls down, loses consciousness for a few hours.
Yeah.
And then by the time he wakes up, it's nighttime.
Yeah.
And the lights from this burning town are in the distance.
Yeah. I mean, that's one incredible scene, right? As he's running through all that.
Yeah. And he starts getting shot at.
Yeah.
And so there's blasts of light.
Mm-hmm.
And then darkness, and he's still running, blasts of light. So he's trying to evade these people from shooting him. And then he comes into the town, right? And and he sees that guy, and he's almost like, maybe this is a friend.
Maybe
this guy
it's a
is
weird
an ally.
scene. Right.
He's just
it's like
hoping.
they look. Yeah, they look at each other. It's almost like they both look at each other while trying to figure out whether it's friend or foe.
Yeah. And then obviously the guy shoots at him, he chases him, and then he slides underneath this drainage area or window or whatever into this house with this woman who's hiding with her baby.
Or a baby, right? I don't think it's hers.
Oh, okay.
She found it, which even makes it more nurturing, right? She has taken the burden upon herself to care for this baby that's not even her own.
Yeah.
I need to double check that, but if I remember right, I'm almost sure it's not. If I remember right, it's not her baby. But what that's where it's like, okay, wow, we just went from this horrible scene of trying to get killed or kill to go underneath to this area. Now we have a woman nurturing and caring for a child. I mean, it's hard to get more stark contrast,
right?
Than to move from that violence and death to a realm of love and nurturing.
Right, and it's almost like in the heat of this battle of life and death between two people, two men, right? He is just like thrust into this position where it's like, oh, okay, this is why I'm doing this.
Right, and then
these are the people I'm trying to protect.
It's with such ease he shifts gears to become tender and caring for both of these human beings there.
Right.
And she reciprocates as well. And she doesn't want him to leave. And I think part of why she doesn't want him to leave is because she sees that humanity in him.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And you can't think of a tougher situation to be in than to be that lady trying to keep this baby alive in this absolute horrible place.
Yeah.
So he has a moment of respite there.
Right.
Right? A moment of gentleness and tender.
And he's got milk.
Yes. Providentially, this cow that's still alive, and somebody milked it, we don't know who. That ends up being not only nourishment and for him, but also this baby.
Right. Anything else you want to add to that scene?
No, I just it's just a very beautiful, tender, nurturing scene.
I love the way it was lit.
Yeah.
It was just a single flame.
Yes. That's a good point. So you contrast the light on the outside, so flares can go up so you can see your enemy to kill them. The light on the inside is to bring nurturing and life, right?
Right, but it's like, the town is on fire, right? There's a building on fire.
Yeah.
And then he goes into this little room, and it's just a more
Is that
controlled
a church, by the way? Is that a church on fire?
I think it might have been.
Okay.
But But in this house, there is a room with a fire controlled, warming this woman and her baby. Like,
Yeah.
that's how different, you know.
And you want to think of Mary and Jesus, right? Although I think the baby's a girl, if I remember right.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Right. So, anyways, that I just like that. I like that. So then he leaves and he's like, all right, I got to get out of here. Right. Got to get back to the mission.
Back to his mission. Like takes that moment, almost a Sabbath, a respite.
Right. And he's running. And as he's running, the sun starts to come up a little bit, right?
Yep.
And then he jumps into a stream from the top of a waterfall, right?
Yes.
Goes under.
Like type of baptism, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And he grabs on.
And saved by this wood, this piece of cross.
And I wouldn't be surprised if that's a cherry tree.
I think it is, because then we have all the cherry blossoms falling, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you call them? Cherry blossoms or leaves or something?
Yeah.
Yes.
And then the sun rises, right?
Yep.
And then he comes up to this blockade, this dam in the river, which is a dam.
By the way, the rock does not break him. It kind of looks like it's going to, right? You know, when you see the scene, he's holding on to that piece of wood and he's heading right for that rock.
I can't remember that.
But it doesn't break him. He actually goes around the rock. Okay, keep going. Yep.
Then he comes to that dam of dead bodies.
Yes. So
and
it's like he's baptized in the dead again. It's just, okay.
Yeah. Kind of like the river Styx, maybe. Something similar.
Maybe, yeah.
And then he has to climb over those dead bodies, and when he gets onto the shore or onto the riverbank, he is just, I feel like he's broken.
Yes.
Like he is just like, this is like, I'm climbing over dead bodies. Like, how am I going to do anything with all these men who came before me have died, and they're just left in this river, just.
Well, how could you get more disoriented than to be thrown in this stream and swirled around and on this shore? I mean, how disheartening, because think about, I'm on this mission. I want to get from point A to point B. I don't even know where I'm at right. Okay.
And then he just picks himself up.
Yep.
Starts climbing up this hill. It's the last hill he climbs.
Okay, yeah.
And he gets up and he's walking through the woods and he hears someone singing. Right?
Yes.
And he sees all these soldiers sitting down and they're not looking at him. They're all looking at this guy in the middle singing that song.
Wayfarer Stranger.
Wayfaring Stranger, yeah.
Yeah, so think about this voice is calling you, right? So you just left this disorienting experience and miserable experience of climbing over dead bodies. You have no idea where to go, right? You don't know what direction you're going. And then all of a sudden you hear the sound of this voice.
Yeah.
So then he starts to follow it.
Yeah.
And it's certainly appropriate for him because he's certainly a wayfarer stranger, right?
Right.
Once again, he hears this calling. He follows it. He sits down at this tree. We got another tree here. And then it's like a moment of respite, but it's not only a moment of respite. Once the song's over, he now knows where he's at, right?
Not yet.
No, not yet. But I'm saying after the song's over, and then he asks these guys.
Yeah, they're like, "Hey, who are you with?" or something like that, and he's like, "I'm looking for certain battalion or whatever." And he's like, "Oh, that's us." And he's like, "What?"
So how could he say, "Look how brilliant I was. I followed this map and I completely..." No.
Right.
Right.
But
okay.
What's fascinating is the 3 moments where he has respite. It's a joke after he was blinded.
Okay.
And his buddy started making a joke, telling him a funny story.
Mm-hmm.
The second one, seeing a woman and a baby,
Yep.
talking to them, the most innocent, right?
Yep.
The least able to protect themselves.
Yes. Most vulnerable.
Most vulnerable. And then a song that tells a story of, well, I mean, you could say an epic poem.
Yeah, and certainly apropos to his life at this point.
Yeah. So, like, I
and
just find
it's a song, and it's a song of redemption, right?
Yeah.
So it's a song that portrays the disorientation of being a wayfaring stranger, but it's a song that it's, what'd you just call it?
An epic poem.
An epic poem. It teaches there is a telos, there is a goal. There's a consummation in goal. There is redemption. There is light at the end of the tunnel.
Right. It grounds you somehow.
Yeah. He's a wayfaring stranger who is being drawn in the right direction by this song. You're right.
I don't know. I just find those three things to be so fascinating.
That's because music.
No one's going. Go ahead.
Music's so powerful.
Right.
This is why, for Tolkien or Lewis, that the act of creation is represented by music. And so the two things that people, two things that cause silence is horror, right? So you saw 9/11 when those buildings were falling, people, they're screaming, but my point is they're not talking. Their hands over their mouth, right? Or beauty. Beauty does the same thing. It brings silence. It brings silence because it gives you, it's a calling to be drawn to something bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's why the final consummation of a Christian's hope and redemption is a beatific vision.
Right.
Okay.
So anyways, watches this performance, listens to the music, and then realizes this is the battalion or group that he is looking for. And finds out that they're getting ready to go anytime now.
Yeah, or some of them have already gone, right?
Right.
Some of them have already gone over the hill.
Right.
And I forget how many waves they were going in, if I remember right, 3, and at least the first one has gone over.
Yeah. And I think the brother was in the second. Maybe so. Right?
Right. Well, he was in one of the waves that went over, because when he does finally find the brother, he finds him attending to his injured soldiers.
Right. I just can't remember if he finds out if the brother had gone or not before. I don't think he had gone yet.
You might be right. I don't remember.
Or maybe he had. Maybe he had, and he's just like, well, maybe he made it.
Yes.
But I need to stop everyone else from going.
Yeah. Correct. Yes.
And so he fights it. Go ahead.
Well, to your point, it not only is it's not only just a mission to save this guy's brother. It's now a mission to save all of his brothers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. He fights through the crowd, through the trench. I mean, I just like him fighting through the trench because it's so tight.
Yeah.
And then he gets to the point where they call everybody to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I can't. Or they're getting ready to call everybody to go. And he was like, I can't get past all these people in this trench. So I've got to get on the field and run.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was such a great shot.
Oh.
And we had talked about this earlier, but like, you haven't played modern video games.
Right.
But this whole film was shot like a modern video game.
Yeah.
It's like it changes from this point of view to behind the main character, but it's always on that character. And then like you see, like you're like whoever is like deciding on what you get to see. It's like when the camera's in front of the characters. The thing in front of them you're not going to be able to see, and so you're kind of anticipating.
Correct. Yep.
And so
Right.
it's like you're building that anticipation because of just the situation you're in. And then when it switches to behind them, you're like, okay, all right, now I get to see. So you kind of eliminate
Mm-hmm.
perspective, and then you give that perspective, and then as an audience member, you're like, okay, what else is out there? Like, what am I looking for? What's going to
Yeah.
pop up? And
No, you're right. Which I like, and maybe it's kind of cool for me because I don't, and I'm not against it. I just don't play modern video games.
right.
When I played video games, it was, you had to, it was a wood burning. That's how you powered the games. You had to keep throwing more logs in and
Yeah.
keep the flames going.
Yeah.
So yeah, when you didn't have enough logs in, the game was really slow. But anyway, but for one who doesn't play video games, it still appealed to me because it was kind of new for me
Mm.
to experience the technology that way. But you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. That is such a powerful scene that when he's running across that field and the very people he's trying to save, back to kind of point you made earlier, the
Yeah.
very people he's trying to save are the ones getting in his way. And not on purpose and not maliciously, they just are. And yeah, you're absolutely right.
That perspective change is video games will do that to you. Like usually it'll be like third person behind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're pressing forward with the joystick, right? And you're moving your character here and there. And then they'll do that switch, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
the camera is in front of your character, and to go forward, you have to pull back on the joystick.
Mm-hmm.
So then you're controlling it like this, and it's disorienting because for your character to turn right, you have to move the joystick left.
Mm.
And so I could just see this as like one of those final scenes in a game where it's just like, all right, it's you got to dodge all these things, blah, 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 and get past this to win the level. It's like the last part of like a hard level.
Yeah.
They'll do that, but it's hard because they've changed perspective on you
Yeah.
or point of view.
Yeah.
So I mean, and that was like, he's running past all the soldiers, right? That he's on the same army of, right? And they're
Yeah.
running
And
into him, and he's
what
just got to
what
get up and keep going.
because they don't see his mission. They don't
Right.
have the hope and faith that he does, so they can't see possibly what he's doing makes any sense, right?
Yeah.
In fact, it looks absurd. Like what are you doing, man? You're running not the exact wrong direction, but you're running sideways. So to kind of what you were saying or what we were talking about earlier, so faith gives him the ability to somewhat tap into that God's eye view, or at least trust that it's reliable.
Yeah.
So now he's going to, he's still determined to give this message to the current, I think it's the colonel who's in charge.
But like, also, he's back with his people. So now it's going to get even harder.
Yeah. So he gets in the trench.
Because like what I was saying earlier, like,
and I know my battery is starting to get low.
Okay.
So let's keep going.
We'll end it soon. But like, his hardest battle was with the people that he's on the same side of. That the visions don't come together. It's like, but the overall thing is like, we all agree, yeah, we're fighting against those people. Right. But like, you can get so disillusioned within that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, he runs, jumps back.
Which can be good and bad, right?
Right.
So, okay.
Jumps back
especially
into
if you're a soldier.
Yeah. Jumps back into Craig's dialogue, for one thing, right?
Yeah.
Makes you really get your stuff together. Jumps back into the trench, finds Benedict Cumberbatch, goes in there, tells him, hey, this, and that. And sure enough, Benedict Cumberbatch is like, get out of here.
Yeah.
And he's
exactly what his good guide, his
Captain Smith.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's exactly what he said he would be.
Yeah. And but he stays in there and fights against it, right? And what was it that made him decide to stop? Do you remember?
Man, I got to go back and watch it now. You got me very curious. It's very. Uh, I think he just stays persistent.
He just stands there.
Well, he does bring up. At first, he just says, "I've got orders from the general. You need to read this. You need to stop." But then he gives him the general's view, the God's eye view,
Yeah.
right? I think it's when he lays that out that then he stops because he says, look, we had aerial photos. We know that this is a trap. You think that you're wide open for victory. You're not. This is a setup. So he starts to give him a little glimpse of the God's eye view almost. And that's when he comes to his senses.
And I think he might have mentioned that he had a friend with him. He's like, it's just
That
you?
might be.
He's like, no. It wasn't
That's right.
my friend.
I think
And
somebody asked him that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And his brother's here or something like that. I think that was mentioned. I think that might have been part of it. But, I mean, that was a tough sell, you know?
Yes.
And if he hadn't have been surrounded by other men, I think Benedict would have been like, get the hell out of here, you know?
Yes. I think the advice he got was good.
Yeah. But that simple advice could have changed everything in that story.
Yeah, so whoever's under the colonel, the guy who thanks him for that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, he might have been a lieutenant, who knows. But he thanks him because he sees the value of what he's done.
Mm-hmm.
The colonel doesn't. The colonel's like, okay, fine. I guess we don't die today kind of thing. I mean, he's a lot like Leslie in that sense.
Yeah. He's been kind of disillusioned in another way.
Yeah, he's certainly more jaded by it. Yeah, he doesn't see the value of it.
Yeah. And so he agrees, and they call it off. And he finds out he's looking for Blake's brother, finds Blake's brother, tells him what happened, gives him the letter or whatever, right? He gives him a letter, right?
He gives him his dog tags in the ring, if I remember right.
Okay. And then he's like, you cared for my brother or something like that, right? You were friends with my brother? Or?
Yeah. Well, no, because at first he realizes where he's from. And he's like, oh, my brother's also from that regiment.
Right.
How's he doing kind of thing. And then I think that's when he explains to him what's happened.
Yeah.
What's really cool in that short little scene is that he has lost his brother, but now he gains a new brother.
Yeah.
And part of what shows you that, I think, is what I alluded to earlier, is that he allows him to write the letter. Now you could say, well, that's just makes sense because he was there, he was the last one there, and so on and so on. Well, that's still a rather intimate thing, right? Mm-hmm. So you're going to be the one to write that letter, and it's almost like he barely knows this guy, but his love and trust for him's at such a high level. He trusts him right now. He has faith in him that he's worthy enough to write that letter for his brother.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if you didn't think that, you certainly wouldn't allow him to write it. You would write it yourself because that's going to your parents or your siblings.
Yeah. Yeah. And
then
he
gives him that honor.
Yeah. Yeah, he does. And that reminds me of like the eulogy of Henry David Thoreau by Emerson. It's one of the like most loving things I've ever read. Like another man wrote for another man.
Right.
He just talked about all the things that Thoreau was passionate about, cared about, and stuff like that. And yeah, it was just that's one of those things I like to go back and read sometimes because like you don't really know what other people see you as until you die.
True, and we've talked about this before when we had done a podcast with your buddy who's finishing up his PhD.
Yeah,
has he finished? We won't mention his name.
I think so. I think so.
Okay, good for him. But eulogies are meant to be a celebration of the best things, right?
Yeah.
I think of we talked about this, the scene out of MASH, and it's been a while since I've seen it, but where eulogies are at 6 o'clock and rebuttals are at 6:30, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's funny, and it's sarcastic, and it certainly fits that kind of sarcasm of war, which we've been talking about. But eulogies do magnify the good things in that person because you're well aware of all the sins, right? That
Yeah.
this, but not, I shouldn't say all the sins. Only God knows all the sins, but you're well aware of this person's many faults, which is not hard to find. Only mercy and love has the ability to see the best in people and easily forgive them. And by the way, that's why I think in The Dark Knight Rises, when Batman forgives Catwoman, after a pretty crappy deal being thrown down this pit and having your back broken and all,
Yeah.
and and all you had
The
to
good
do to
stuff.
get out. But then when he forgives her, it's just almost like
That's what she needed.
it was. But it's what true forgiveness does. Is he didn't? Well, yeah, and you shouldn't have done this, and you should. I mean, man, talk about a guy who could have a laundry list of things. But then he says, yeah, I admit I was a little disappointed.
Yeah.
But I believe there's something more to you than that. Yeah, that's what true forgiveness does.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay. So he
Then he
now,
goes. Go ahead.
okay, keep going. No, I
He,
want you to keep going.
he just goes under a tree, just like the movie started, goes back to
Yes,
sit under a tree, pulls out the picture of Blake's family, or was it his family?
I think it's his family,
Yeah.
and that's a good point. I mean, it's brought it's united two families here, and I don't know this for sure, but I like to think of that second tree almost the tree of life, right?
Yeah.
He's a new man. He's been baptized, he and now he's been raised, and he's a new man, right? So I think of what Paul says in Romans, being baptized with Christ and risen with Christ. Now you become something new. A death has happened. It's a death of yourself. It's a death of your union with Adam, and now it's a life with union with Christ. So it's a death to all that nihilism and darkness, and now it's a resurrection into this new life and new light,
Yeah.
which was represented by the cherry trees.
Right. Yeah.
And unless a grain of wheat fall to the ground and die, it can't bring forth fruit. And so, yes, and this new life now has united him in love with this other person, his Blake's brother,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and so don't you think, though? I just want to mention something here. You and I really enjoyed the movie. We're bringing out the good things. Now, let's talk about this in criticism, because right now we're doing a charitable reading of this because we really have no desire to enter this with kind of a hermeneutic of suspicion and skepticism. And then if I do that, I'll show everybody how smart I am when I critique this movie and just tear it to pieces and analyze it and just say how it so disappointed me, right?
Yeah, but that makes me feel good, John.
Okay, yeah, okay. So, but then you're kind of like the character Leslie in the movie. And I'm not saying that. Look, there are bad movies. You and I probably just won't even review them.
Right.
Okay, and that's true. There are bad movies out there. But man, there's so much good stuff in this movie that just turning on this hyper skepticism and suspicion and but you and I don't want to be children of Rene Descartes and I don't know, Schopenhauer and that kind of thing. Let's approach this with a hermeneutic of humility and charity And I think if you approach it that way, in an attitude of thankfulness and all the rest, man, you'll just see some absolutely true and good and beautiful things in this film.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to start this video. I'll probably just take that and put it at the front.
Well, that might be, yeah, because to play off the themes we've been playing off, in the nature of the case, yeah, is there a place for skepticism? Yes, there's a legitimate, rational skepticism. But when you're approaching something like film or music or art in general, I think to play off the themes we've been talking about, to see the deeper magic, you have to approach it with a hermeneutic of charity and love and gratefulness.